So, uh, thank you. Luis and I thank everybody for coming. As just an introduction for myself, I'm Steve Moss, and I'm the founder and president of Executive Springboard. We're a mentoring organization that works with executives primarily in periods of transition, and brought in by companies to help with their top leaders' continued professional growth. And my colleague today is Luis, and I'll let Luis introduce himself.
Of course. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for the invitation. Thanks to everybody who's joining us. Thank you for making the time. I know everybody is busy and there's so much going on, but thank you for taking this hour here for us to connect. So my name is Luis Moreno. I've known Steve for many, many years, since 2008, right? So it's a long time. And I am one of the mentors in Executive Springboard, and I work at the University of Minnesota as an adjunct professor. I teach management and leadership, and I work training executives in, leadership development, and my specialties are human-centered leadership and emotional intelligence. So thank you. Steve will pick us up here in a few seconds, but we wanted to go ahead and just have a very friendly conversation so that we can exchange our perspectives and experiences in this fascinating topic of communication and trust. So, Steve.
Yeah, one of the things I think of is with trust. There's a kind of a metaphor that I'll use, something that happens when I'm with my grandsons, and we're building a Duplo tower, and the tower goes up brick by brick. And it kind of helps. My role in this is basically to establish a strong base for them as they start building the tower up. And one is 2.5 and the other's 4 years old. So you can imagine how these things start looking. And they'll keep building, just like with trust. You build it brick by brick. But if they start building something that kind of goes off to the side a little bit, or they get tired of it and give it a swipe, down it goes. And I think it's kind of the same thing with trust, that it's something that is built on incrementally, but at the same time, it's something that you have to be careful, that you don't, by accident, with a rash move, destroy what it is that you've built. Today, we'll cover a handful of practical communication tools that can help build trust. And some of them are aimed at your boss or your peers or your reports. And in the back half of this, we'll have a couple of breakout groups where you'll have a chance to get to know each other on this Zoom call. So please stick around if you can. After the session, we'll send a summary, a transcript, and a video to all the participants who would like to receive it. So if you would just if you can add your name and your email address in chat, so it'll be easy for us to pick that up and send things out to you. That would be great. Okay. And I'd also like to encourage discussion during our time together. It's a small enough group that if somebody has something to say, we're not going to get in the way of people, with their insights to add. The people that we have here, I think some of our participants are at least as expert as we are on some of these topics. So from that standpoint, shall we dive in?
Yeah, and I want to just quickly, Steve, I love your analogy with the tower, and I wanted to build on that, that sometimes, and again, like Steve said, anyone feel free to chime in if you have an experience around this. But when you were sharing the example of tower, Steve, one of the things I was thinking in my head is that sometimes the towers falls down unexpectedly, like it's a surprise. You're like, the tower falls down at a moment when we're not thinking that it was gonna fall, right? And I think the analogy aligns here very well in my head, that in my experience, sometimes I myself have been surprised that something that I thought was stronger and well built and everything all of a sudden falls apart. And It has made me in time, as I get older, it has made me be more, first, this idea of even things that seem solid that you would have otherwise thought, wow, this is going to be forever, maybe more fragile than you imagine. And so it's made me more thoughtful and more intentional to kind of be more so when it comes to communication, when talking to someone. I have, for example, had the experience of I write something, I send it, and somebody kind of read it in a different way and thought something that was not what I intended to say. So I have in time kind of be more purposeful and more intentional about when kind of making sure that something is as obvious as possible, even sometimes even at the price of a person thinking, well, Luis, yeah, I know that, yeah, but I'm not gonna risk it to leave it to you to interpret it. I want to make sure that you read it in the way that I intended it because of that risk of things kind of falling apart as a surprise unexpectedly in front of your eyes.
Well, and I want to thank you, Luis, for that bit of vulnerability and transparency in what has worked and what hasn't worked for you. I think that's one of the things we'll end up covering today is kind of that sense of vulnerability. That's kind of a key part of being authentic and being a leader. And so I welcome anybody who's got a thought like that along the way to chime in. Let me start by talking about some things that can work when we're dealing upwards in a hierarchy. If you're talking to your boss, one of the things that we see at Executive Springboard, we'll ask people how leadership responds to bad news. And the response that we get almost always is they're fair if you give them proper warning. And so the message for us is really to think about no surprises. Bad news has to travel up early. Good news can sometimes wait, but don't blind somebody. And another piece that we get a lot in the feedback when we're doing a cultural assessment is is trying to avoid incrementalization. So instead of saying, "Oh, we recognize a problem, and it's this big," when you realize it's this big, and you hope over time you can catch up to the reality. Most of the time, it's a whole lot easier to just rip the bandage off and tell somebody where things are and what you're thinking about doing to fix it.
Yeah. And I want to share a thought there, Steve. And again, we keep saying the same thing, but guys, anyone who has a thought, feel free to chime in. But I have a thought in that, how, so in my head, there are like two ways to go about communicating, like about news and stuff. And one way is that you feel like you communicate bad news to your leadership, to your boss, because you think that there is a chance that your boss is going to find out. So you're like, okay, they're going to find out. I might as well go ahead and say it. But what if, right? What about the situation where it's a very, very low chance that your boss is going to find out? That there's the question, right? Do you tell or not tell? And what I have found over time is kind of it's an interesting thing where you choose to be, to have integrity, to say there is like zero chance that my boss is going to find out about this, and I'm still going to go ahead and bring it up and say it. Because in that case, in terms of building trust, think about from an empathy standpoint, if you are the boss, and a report of yours comes in and says, hey, Steve, here's what happened, this and that, on something that you're thinking, I may not have ever found out about this, right? So, but what a thing that this person is going to come in at, taking a risk and letting me know. To me, that, in the context of the conversation today, which is about how do you leverage communication as a tool to build trust, one way to build trust is to confess, right? Something that your boss was very unlikely to find out by themselves.
Anybody want to build on that? Thoughts? Any additions? Okay.
All right, and I can continue. So
Yeah.
we have a few notes here. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, and some of the things will be obvious, but just to put everything on the table. But one of the ways that we build trust is one is, so let's say, going to the basics, you have a new boss, right? So you have a new reporting relationship and you don't know this boss yet. So you don't know if they have your back or not, if they are trustworthy, should you kind of, rely on this boss. And one of the ways that you as a boss, can build trust is to really find ways to let the person know that you really want their best interest and that you're looking out for them, right? So one of the things that I've found out to be successful, I'm sure is this idea of so as you are giving credit to your reports, and that's something, Steve, that we can go. We've talked about these, the whole dynamic of giving credit, right? So I'll start by saying that in the research, a lot of people report that they feel that their bosses are not giving credit. Not only so, it's the bad news starts with the fact that many people feel that their bosses don't give them credit for good work that they're doing. That's bad enough. But it actually gets worse because there is an important number of people that feel that great work that they do, somebody else, sometimes their boss, is taking credit for, which then is a sense of like, this is an injustice, right? Like, I'm doing this great work and somebody is kind of benefiting from the impact of my work. So you never want to report to feel that you either are not giving them credit or that you are taking credit for work that they're doing, right? So because there is a chance that they may think that, even if that's not the case, the way to combat that is to proactively give praise publicly, right, to your report. And, you can either in person, right, hey, kudos to Adam, Adam, that was great work there, and then continuously develop the habit as a leader to be giving credit to the people in your team and your colleagues, in public, but then also through email that when you are, so I have had bosses, for example, that they will say either they'll send a very complimentary email about me, something like giving me, kudos there to somebody else, right? Or especially higher, sending an email up to the leadership about something that I did and either forwarding them to me or copying me in the email. And when I see that, I'm thinking, I have to trust that this person is looking out for me because the person is putting their name on the line to send something up to leadership to say something positive about me, right? So just a thought on one way in which we can build trust by leveraging communication.
And if I can add to that, a lot of when if people leave an organization, it's often because of something that's not going right between them and their boss. And that issue of praise as kind of a way of establishing where credit is due is one of the ways it's an enormous um, step in terms of retention to be able to get that because that's one of the key things that a lot of people are looking for. Um,
Yes. One
another
thing,
go ahead.
Steve, just
Yeah, yeah.
quickly, because something that you and I had talked about a long time ago that I think is important, I want to put it on this table, is that many times with managers that we work with, one of the complaints is that managers feel that their direct reports are reaching out to, so they're skipping them, right? So like I have
Yeah.
somebody reporting to me and then I am uncomfortable because the person that is reporting to me has reached out to my boss, basically skipping me, right? And that is bad. And we all, all of us have been working for a long time knows that that's a gamble to do that because that can work or not work. Most likely, it's not going to go well for the person doing that. But anyway, what we find in the observational, anecdotal observation and in the research is that one of the reasons why that can happen is because, let's say if I'm in the middle, I'm in the one in the middle, if one of my reports is consistently reaching out to my leadership, one of the reasons why they could be doing that is because they have a perception that I am not giving them credit for the work that they're doing. So one thing that would help, one thing that would make your reports not need to communicate to your bosses is that to make them feel that they don't have to do that because you're doing that for them, right? So then going back to your point, Steve, in terms of like giving credit is by you developing the habit to be giving credit to your report, you will lower, in an ideal situation, it is a good chance that you are going to lower the probability of your report feeling the need to be communicating with your bosses, because mostly they do it to kind of gain credibility with them, right? So they'll, hey, my boss is not talking about me, let me do that. And then I also wanted to mention quickly something that, one-on-one, right, and leadership one-on-one is that in those instances when it's the opposite, and rather than giving credit, you want to address an issue in a situation, something that you're not happy with. We all know that those are the times when you have to be thoughtful about what is the time and moment to do that, and that you don't want to do that in public, with other people, but rather to do it privately on a one-on-one basis, right?
Can I ask the group, just to the point that Luis is bringing up, if there are any things, any nuggets that you want to share on either what has worked well when you're facing a situation where your boss and a subordinate um, seem to be in conversations that are leaving you out. What are some things that you might think about doing to respond to that, and what are some things to avoid? Any thoughts? Anybody want to get off of mute?
Sure, I'll get off of mute, Steve. I think there's a similar way of looking at it in terms of if they're going up to your boss, how do you look inside yourself and say, how am I not building the trust that's there? I mean, you talked about some tactical things, but are there things on a day-to-day basis that the catalyst of maybe not mentioning or praising and doing something there might be something deeper? It's something that I've always tried to instill in my coaching, as well as when I was leading teams, to sit there and say, what is it about me? It's kind of some of the team attitude that I have from playing basketball and stuff like that.
Great. And anything that maybe we should kind of say needs to be avoided in a situation like this? The thing that comes to mind to me, and I'll throw this out and just see if there's a response, is to confront the person below you. I don't think I mean, the situation that's being brought up, sometimes it will be about you haven't necessarily built enough trust. Honestly, there can be all sorts of other reasons. Your boss and somebody else might have a mentorship relationship, and it has skipped you, but that should be okay. But part of this is, are you being left out of things that are part of your accountability? That's something to understand. And the
Right.
person to have that conversation with is probably not the person who reports to you, but the person you report to. Any thoughts, disagreements?
I'm just going to step in and add
Hi,
another.
Rosa.
Hello, I'm just going to add a nuance to that, because from a female perspective in leadership, it has a different connotation sometimes. And it does play a difference when the skipping part happens to have the same male gender. That I think at times I have felt has led to a perception of work tied into gender. So I think that you're right, having the conversation with the person you report to, or in my case, the person I report to, and bringing it up in the sense of saying, we want to just clear the air. We want to be transparent. Can you explore if this is what's happening? That has been helpful for me. And in conversations with peers in the same situation, it is not uncommon for that to happen.
Yeah.
I love that perspective, Rosa. Thanks for bringing it up, because I'm gonna kind of take what you said and kind of brighten a little bit more and say, what if, right? So like if we think about like DEI, right, which some people don't want to talk as much about these days, but in DEI, when we think about like inclusion, what happens when so we have kind of like the person that I'm gonna just use, the person on the lower level, you have a person in the middle and the person on the top, right, from a hierarchy standpoint. what happens when the person in the middle is from a different community, can be different gender, can be different race, it can be different, right? So like the person in the bottom and the person on the top, they both live in the same, area of town. They play golf together on Sunday and all that. And then somehow the person in the middle, there is this one thing that the person on the bottom and the top share that I don't have. It can be gender. I'm not, the person in the middle, I'm a woman, and these two guys are dudes, right? So then I think that it kind of may make me feel like I'm being excluded because there is this one element that the other two people have that are bringing them together is leaving me out, and that creates a serious problem for. I'm gonna bring in. So DEI and inclusion is kind of can be tricky sometimes and sensitive in a way that, for example, I was looking at a report information that was very interesting, and most people would say, "Wow, that's so silly and so stupid." But you got to think about these things. So when there is a meeting, there is an in-person meeting, right? And there are multiple people, 5, 6 people, however many. A lot of times when the meeting ends, somebody needs to go somewhere else, right? So there is like a person that stands up, or a few folks stand up and they are ready to leave or they leave, but the rest of the group stays and they continue talking, or they kind of wait for you to leave, and then after you've left they continue the conversation. Interestingly enough, for many people, that they don't appreciate that, and they don't feel good about it, because the way they perceive it is, it's like, okay, if the meeting ended, we all have to leave. Either we all stay or we all leave. But if I leave and you guys are kind of waiting for me to leave to continue the conversation, I may have a perception. It all has to do with your insecurities, your confidence, and the whole dynamic and all that. But there are instances where you can perceive that as, "Oh, I see, there is a part of the conversation that I cannot be part of, and you're waiting for me to leave so that you can continue." So I would recommend in that case that from an inclusion standpoint, when the meeting ends, if the meeting ends, we all leave. Or that you use the power of language again to build trust, to say, "Hey, oh, you gotta go, Steve. Okay, just so that you know, Rosa and I were working in this other project stuff. So, Steve, I'm gonna take the opportunity here to just touch base here with Rosa on this other thing, because now at least I'm providing you context. Like, yeah, I'm gonna talk about Rosa because we have something else to talk about that has nothing to do with you. But I have the courtesy to let you know this has nothing to do with you."
Yeah, and that in a case like that, providing the context is behavior that supports an assumption of positive intent, right? So you're less likely, the other people there are less likely to feel excluded, and particularly if you're saying that we've got another topic that we're going to talk about, or you make affirming statements, that are suggesting that we're on the same side, we're trying to achieve the same thing. It's all really kind of important here for you to talk about your goals. Keep the feeling that maybe something personal, that is this my own bias? How does this play in? See whether does that really belong in the discussion or not, and being able to go at something with this notion that we are on the same team, I think can be a pretty healthy thing. I want to bring up something else that you said before, Luis, and a tool that we use at Executive Springboard in decision rights, and that's do, tell, ask. And so the thought here is, I can have a conversation with my boss or with the person, somebody who reports to me, and say, there are three kinds of decisions that can be made, or three ways to act. In one, you can just do something and not tell me. The notion you were having before about is there integrity in the fact that somebody may not even know there's a problem or know there's a situation. Well, there are some times when, frankly, the boss doesn't have to know. You've got a problem, you're just going to solve it, it's all within your domain. Okay, that's a do. Then there are tells, where once I do something, I feel obliged to go and tell my boss that I did that. And then there's an ask. Do I have the permission to do this thing that I'm thinking about? And those are three different ways of thinking about decision rights. And a place where this becomes really important is in de-escalating a situation. Because if you have a common language like that, and a boss seems to be getting, we'll make it the boss. The boss is getting upset at a course of action that I took. It can get diffused by me saying, I'm sorry, I thought this was a tell, and evidently you thought this was an ask, right? So there's the language there that helps put this in the right context, and that's something that can help build trust, because at least you've got the common language to try to get there.
Or even worse, I thought it was a do, and it was an ask.
It was an ask.
So
That's a bigger
even worse.
problem. Yep, 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 for sure. Um, there was supposed to be somebody here today who didn't show up. And I was going to have him tell a story, but I guess I'll tell it instead. Another tool to keep in mind, and this is one that I think is really helpful as leaders with the people who report to you. It's called Belay On, and the person who is going to be here was an old boss of mine who is a mountain climber, and he can go into a whole lot more detail than I can about belaying and the process of that. But if you're climbing a mountain, there is a second person who's attached to you, who has a device that acts as a brake and can keep the rope slack at the right time, tightens it up, and makes sure that if you slip, you're not going too far. And the process for this is for the climber to say, on belay, and the response from his supporter is to say, belay on. The parallel in the business world is somebody who wants to come into your office and shut the door and say what's on their mind. Talk about a problem they have. Talk about a problem they have with you. Whatever it may be, for them to be able to, whether it's a code word like on belay, or just recognizing a situation that requires you to be present, not to be doing other things, to be distracted, to commit to not having an emotional response or holding something against somebody, can be a hugely effective tool in developing trust for somebody who works for you. Anybody have a situation like that they care to share?
I really like that example, Steve. That was really, I love that. I took the note on that. One thing that I ran into that I'd be curious for your insight was I had a role where my boss sat in Switzerland, and he wasn't the original person that hired me, and so we didn't have rapport built over time. And we really struggled to build rapport via video calls like this. When we would interact live and in person, we had really good rapport. But there was, and there were layers of that. Cultural differences. He grew up in Switzerland. English was his third language. So there were other barriers that the video platform hindered, I think, a little bit. Just curious if you guys have any insight on communicating in different mediums like this and challenges folks have and ways to overcome that.
Luis, you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, I just obviously first want to acknowledge that is, I mean, people think, oh, no, you have a chance to do it online and stuff is the same. We're here, you're there, we're in a global world. But I think research says that there is definitely, to your point, Phil, that, there's so much that goes on. I can tell you, for example, with the Latino culture, Rosa here too is with Latinos, one thing that I'm just gonna say as an example, right? And the power of like the difference between being in person and being online is that in some cultures, like the Latino culture, the space, like your personal space is shorter, right? So you are actually more physical. And one of the things that in the research is that when Latinos are giving bad news, like if I was giving you, for example, if I was your boss and I was giving you your performance review, and there were some areas and stuff that I want to bring up to your attention, things, areas of opportunities where you have to work on it. One of the ways that Latinos do is because they also there is with your open arms, very lightly, with the tip of your fingers, you kind of touch the how do you say what's this part of your body? Your elbow. Sorry, see, it's Friday. So anyway, it's a very light touch, and it all depends, obviously, right? I mean, careful. You have to be mindful about that, but it's not uncommon in Latin America that a person would very lightly kind of just do a quick touch to the elbow because they are saying to you, it's okay, no worries. I am giving you this what appears to be a negative feedback, but hey, I got you. You can trust me that I'm doing this, for your own benefit. So what happens is, so for Latinos, if somebody's giving you a tough feedback, like a critical feedback, and your brain is not receiving the touch, now you're scared because it's like, okay, I'm getting like the negative side of it, but what's supposed to balance the thing to tell me, hey, you're okay, is not coming because the person is not able to touch you right through this. So just as an example, so I don't have like a solution necessarily for that, but what I would say is the awareness is important to, I would start, for example, in my own case, to know that to understand and recognize the difference between being in person and being online, and maybe being open about it and talking about it and saying, hey, when talking about like something difficult or whatever, is, hey, I wish that we were here, both in person. I understand that this is not ideal and all that, and kind of bringing it up. One thing quickly that is not exactly the answer to your question, Phil, but kind of connected to it in a way. One of the things that I think is fascinating is that there is a shift in when you're talking about like the right media, the right space, the right time. In the past, when some of us started in corporate America a few decades ago, there was this romanticism about the value of speed of resolution. So when there was a problem, you needed to resolve it right away. Like, we need to resolve this right now, right? So, I mean, your boss is in Switzerland, it's late, right? I don't know how many 7 hour differences or more. And you're like, we need to resolve this right now and stuff. So people used to, decades ago, to rush a decision because of this idea that something needed to be resolved. And what the research is showing, some research is showing right now, is that many people prefer a delay correct answer, so a quality resolution that takes longer than a lower quality resolution that is that you have now. So basically, people are willing to wait if if the solution is going to be better. So in this case, if you are a situation where your boss is in a different country, in a different time zone, and all that, what I recommend is to use language to say, hey, I know that this is important. We want to resolve this quickly. What time is it for you? Is it already, 8, 9 p.m. for you? Do you want to, I think, how is your calendar for tomorrow morning? Do you want to, and especially, for example, when emotions are involved in terms of like emotional self-control and emotional intelligence, is like, hey, if something is heated, is a very difficult topic, and you are feeling strongly about it, that you can use language and say, hey, would that be okay that we connect tomorrow? I know it's late for you, and right, I'm gonna be thinking, so if we pause it right now, we can connect tomorrow. In the meantime, I have some ideas. I want to look for, I know there is a source that I have that has some ideas. I'm going to look it up when we meet tomorrow and this and that. So you're buying time, you feel better by the time you meet with the person and all that. And then you're not rushing to have a low quality resolution just for the sake of having an immediate answer. So anyway, just a few thoughts, Phil. I know that's not exactly the answer to your question, but just a few perspectives.
Phil, if I can add something to this, lots of times we try to match the medium with the kind of message that we have. And I think the way to do it is to think about what's the best way for the other person, for the recipient, to get the message, not what's easiest for me. So, it may very well be that a sensitive topic, even if that's going to be difficult, the closer you can get to live, the better off it is. where routine updates might be written, or after something happens, to memorialize it, it's something that's written. But it becomes kind of critical, I think, to understand the audience well enough to see that. And so for instance, a beautifully written email in a organization that's a meeting culture isn't necessarily hitting the mark at all. And it's a tough one, I think, for what you said, where if you come to the conclusion that that in person is what's required to make that connection, and you're an ocean away from them, it's really difficult. Maybe it's acknowledging that, or finding the right time, to build that relationship when you do find yourself in the same thing. But video can be kind of like that in between. It's a whole lot better than sending a text or an email. It has much more immediacy and authenticity to it. And there's something about it that if the conversations are left in emails, lots of times there's escalations of emotions that happen because people didn't think of counting to 10 before they press send. And I think we do a better job of regulating that when we're seeing somebody, whether it's in person or at least if it's in video.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay.
I can move to a new topic,
Yeah,
Steve.
go ahead. I
Yeah,
want, because
good.
I know we want to have time for breakouts as well here in a few
Yes.
minutes. So
Or maybe let's do
no, go
one
ahead.
topic.
One more
Okay.
shot.
One more and yeah. No, so going back to how do we leverage communication in terms of building trust, and one of it, we literally are going here to the basic, because sometimes with these things we have to do the one-on-one, and in terms of building trust is how do you communicate where you can show intent, right? I mean, it's like leveraging every opportunity to show, your intention so to show, project good intent, and then also to assume good intent from others, right? So let's say, in situations of conflict management, well, first is going back to our conversation earlier, is that you are proactively always working in a way that, you're building the tower, right? Going back to Steve's analogy. So the best time to resolve a conflict is before the conflict actually happens, right? So as you are building the tower, you're always carefully taking every opportunity to build trust by showing that you have good intentions. We have shared a few examples of how you do that. But then when the conflict then unfortunately actually happens, then that you are able to first is, kind of position yourself in the conversation and say, hey, I come from peace, right? Here my intention is what I plan to do and all that. And one example that I would give is, let's go back to the example of providing performance review, right? So one of the top things, one of the reasons why many people resign is because of performance review that was not managed well, that was not like delivered well. When I think it's like 70% of employees or something that receive a performance review when they didn't feel value for the work they do, that they will resign within a year. So if we take that example, is okay, you want to give a performance review, and in your responsibility as a manager, you've identified that someone in your team that has a great talent has important opportunities in terms of development, right? How do you bring those up, and so what I do, the analogy that I wanted to bring is I teach here at the University of Minnesota. So a lot of times the students, I teach undergrad, and sometimes they're freshmen. So it's like their first semester, they're coming from high school. So now a student has turned in an assignment that cannot get all the points because the assignment is just not hitting the mark. So then, from an integrity standpoint, as a professor, you just give the points, or do you use an opportunity? What's your responsibility? Do you want to just make somebody feel good, or do you want to actually, help that person to give opportunities to improve? So what I do is, if an assignment is not hitting the mark, I will grade it, accordingly, right? But I meet with the student when the students ask to meet with me. one way to get the student to really want to work in the assignment and get better and improve and all that is by gaining their trust that you're not doing that to make their life miserable because you want to fail them or anything like that. I usually say, hey, it's great to have you in class. You've had a great participation and kind of the positive things and all that. And then I go, hey, here are the things that you have. Here's how I would do it. And in some cases, depending on the flexibility that I may have, there may be instances where I say, hey, do you want to go ahead and redo the work and stuff and, bring it back? I can give you some partial credits and stuff like that. So if I bring that analogy into the workplace, it would be, how do you convey the same idea to your employees? Like, hey, it's a pleasure to have you in the team. We've had a great, I think you have a great outlook here for you. There's a great potential that you have. And I do believe that these are areas that you have to pay attention to. And here are some ways in which I can help you. Here are some resources. Hey, there is a training that I'm going to sign you up. Oh, hey, there is this training in Texas. I'm going to send you down to Texas to take this training and all that. But this is whole idea of showing, your intent. If it's a conflict, always assuming people are coming with good intent. But it comes from this place of who are we in our hearts, who are we as human and as people, so that people kind of feel more comfortable and trust you to know that this is all kind of fair and right. So I open it up for anyone that wants to chime in, share your own experience as an example, or disagree if that didn't align with your thoughts.
Good on this?
Oh,
Anybody?
there's one thing that, Luis, when you're mentioning kind of a valuable member of the team, or you've been participating well, there's the compliments. I thought of a study done by the Positive Coaching Alliance that works in youth sports to be able to help development of youth through sport. And they talk about a 5-to-1 ratio of compliments to constructive criticism in a way of building trust and the trust power dynamic. That if you I think 5-to-1 might be a little much sometimes, but it has that inherent understanding that it's the role of the superior to provide that trusted feedback. That if you have some things that you're doing some positive stuff, it gives you the political capital to be able to go and give the constructive criticism. And as long as it's done in a way that, they can receive, it's in their frequency, that you can, because there's another thing that's brought me up in terms of the Duplo blocks. I've said a lot of times that every single conversation, you have a chance to build on the relationship or tear something down.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes tearing down is actually a good thing if you're not actually building up a structure that can actually support stress, wind, hail, whatever the case may be, that you need to tear some things down as well. But those are just some thoughts that I was having as I was listening to you.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you, Eric. Hey, why don't we bounce into? I'm sorry, Adam. You gotta you're
just a
showing up
30
on the
second.
screen. Well, okay.
Quick one on that one. Is that I find that sometimes the praise and then the criticism aren't as rigid as maybe it might sound if someone was reading a transcript of this. I might say to somebody, "Hey, I love that survey you sent out to your department. That's really great. Maybe I have a thought that it could have been better." But I say, "I love that you took that on and decided to do that. Did you get it from information? Having done it, was there anything that you wish you might have done differently?"
Yeah.
Let's see if they come through with it. And let's see if they even ask me, like, "Well, what did you think of it?" Sometimes you can work that way, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to approach it as I have to pray. I'm going to praise. I'm going to criticize. I'm going to praise, and I'm going to open the door to provide feedback. Man.
I love that. Absolutely. Yeah. And then just on that note, I think we want to go into breaks, but one thing that I always, when I'm coaching somebody that I say, it's almost like, to me, it's like a vector. One is, here you are where you're close to feedback, like you hate feedback, critical feedback. You don't want people to give it, you avoid it and all that. Then, you get to a point where you listen to it. you embrace it, you believe it, and then you get all the way to you look for it, like you seek for it, right? So instead of waiting for your boss to come in and give you feedback, you actually go to your boss or to your colleagues and say, hey, how did I do? Or even I've had people that, and I've done that myself too, or say, you do a presentation, say, I don't think that went very well, right? It has to be genuine, right? The truth. If you felt it didn't go well, you go to somebody and say, I think that didn't go very well. What did you think? And then you open the door for the person to tell you. Steve, we want to let's do the breakouts
Yeah,
since
let's
we
do
are.
this. Let's do this quickly. We're going to take about 10 minutes to do this. They'll give us a couple minutes to come back at the end. If we can think about, reflect on, or discuss a situation that was complex, maybe personal or professional, where it was not immediately clear how to handle the communication to build and maintain trust. What was the situation? What did you do? How do you do as a team recommend that people manage a situation like that in the future? Maybe it's something that we've discussed. Maybe you're adding something on your own. Okay. We'll do 10 minutes. I'll give you a warning like 2 minutes before we come back. Here we go.
And are you going to do three? Okay, three. All right.
Yep. Okay. We're just waiting for everybody else to come back on.
While we're waiting, I'll just quickly say thanks for putting this together, Steve. It's great.
Yeah.
I'm
Thank
glad
you.
that everybody here could join us. It's great.
Was everybody able to meet with someone? And Adam and Barbara and Rosa,
Yeah.
who are you guys with?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then probably it seems like we may have lost, or are there some people still in a room that haven't
Yes,
come back?
there's a room that should be closing
Okay,
in a matter
there you
of
go.
seconds. So,
They're back here. Oh, Phil and Eric. Okay,
yep.
and Brian. Thank you, Brian, for coming back. Were
Okay.
you, Brian? Did you get to be with someone in a room? Were you with someone in a room, Brian?
Yep. Yes, I was.
Okay,
Okay.
awesome,
We
very
got
good. All
everybody
right.
back then. Um, eh, I was just wondering if anybody wants to share any highlights from the group. I mean, we got like 1 or 2 minutes left. So if people had something about the situation they faced and maybe a different strategy that than they would have had in the past, anything
Yeah,
that
and I
people
would
want to
say,
share?
we started a few minutes late. Is everybody okay? Just being 3, 4, 5 minutes here so that people can share a couple of stories before we go. Yeah. Okay, good. That's good. Who would like to share?
Eric, Phil, and I had a great discussion, on a couple different topics, so trying to gain trust with a colleague who is very protective of his tribal knowledge, and then also change management as well, and in both cases, I think we came up with some great strategies to try to manage those things, so I'll focus on change management here, and in that case, it really comes down to patience on both sides, right? So you're not going to be rewarded with trust just in one interaction, right? This is a process that takes time. And then the other important piece to keep in mind too is that, this isn't something that you have to go at on your own, right? So when you're trying to implement a change process, identify who your change champions are within your group, and use them to influence, the rest of the group that you have as well. And, and as you work on those individuals that might be skeptical, that might be, dragging their feet on this a little bit, those are the folks who can become your change champions as well, and help to help to influence the rest of the group. Okay, I was skeptical of this at first, and this is how I came around, and that can help really fuel a sea change across your whole organization.
I love it. I love it. And Brian, you said a lot of things that I love there. And one in particular is this whole idea of a journey, right? It's like you're not going to change things overnight, but it's more about the patience, using your own words to kind of understand you're in a journey and it's a process. And as long as you're moving kind of in the right direction, you are optimistic that you'll get there. I love that.
Rosa, do you want to comment at all on our group?
Well, first of all, I'm grateful for all your ears and your feedback. And we were talking about cultural aspects associated to giving feedback, and not an unreadiness possibly to hear feedback. in particular. So one of the things I'm walking away from is the fact that the awareness on our behalf of seeing what's happening beyond what's happening is an important piece. And also having that conception of the bigger picture of the intent. Why do we give this feedback? What is it for? And knowing that there's a boundary, like I can only go so far in sharing and promoting growth. And then it takes the other person to take that information and grow with it, while I navigate how that continues to impact the group. I think that's kind of like to put it in a nutshell, but I think other folks might have seen also other pieces.
Yeah, a piece that I saw on that was that it's not just necessarily the trust of one individual; it could be the trust of the entire team,
Right.
Mhm.
and that even the effort, you make an effort to try with one individual, but if there are things that are not okay there, accepting them is not okay for the rest of the team.
Right.
Yep, yep. The
And
third
I
group,
just quickly, Rosa,
yeah.
I think you bring up a great point in terms of like, so what you said made me think of times in my life when I gave feedback and I may have gone too far where I felt, where the person just didn't accept it or take it. And you can put that to the responsibility of the person. Well, they're not ready in this now. But then I also have thought about how far have I gotten, and where is the point? What's the balance between? So there is only so much that you can give a person, and you have to be like pacing yourself and checking in to see how much the person can take, and then kind of go, step by. So right now, I feel that I'm more thoughtful in how much feedback I provide, so that I don't go beyond what I think is appropriate at the time. Even if I'm thinking that it will be to the benefit of the person to the feedback, but that may not be the time for, it's too much at the time or anything like that. But anyway,
Well,
in my team, I was,
Luis, so you will give feedback until someone cries and then you back off?
well, I have made people feel bad. I'm not
Oh,
a
yeah.
bad guy, but I have had a report that I said something that was with the best intention, but the person didn't take it
Yeah.
well. So today I would kind of be more thoughtful and
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
knowing where to stop. So Mario and Steve were with me, and I love the examples they gave. I would love for, I'd say if both Mario and Steve, you guys want to share I love the examples that you shared.
Sure, this is Steve. The example I was talking about was an executive that I worked with who was new to a team and made some sweeping changes to how the org chart was set up. And so even though the team had already been working very hard on clarifying the different roles that were existing, there was a lot of struggle and concern about how their clients were going to be more confused if the change happened. And so instead of fighting against and saying I disagree, we formulated some strategic, open-ended questions around that supported saying that she's trying to do something effective, but it's maybe lacking some information, or maybe I'm lacking information from her. So it was around saying, well, there's some costs incurred with this change. And so I'm wondering how you're seeing that we're able to compensate for those costs, or those costs are made null because of the changes. And because I was able to approach it that way, it was less attacking, and the conversation kept going, and it was very clear there wasn't forethought around those things. And so we were able to pivot more effectively because of that. And so, yeah, a situation where ego was pulled at the end because we wanted to have that control, but we were able to kind of clarify where things were, so we felt more resolved in calling for better scrutiny and better strategic thinking by our leadership. I'll give it over to Mario.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, so I was working on a project, bunch of engineer and in cybersecurity, so bunch of engineer, one manager, and we were working on a sprint. We were trying a new methodology where we implement a sprint. At the end of the sprint, you have to provide feedback on how what went well, what didn't work, and what we need to improve. Those are the three questions at the end of the sprint. And everything, all the thing, the feedback was that the manager wasn't handling the process effectively. But the manager felt attacked and he pushed back on everything. He didn't like it at all. You can see his body language. He got defensive to the point that after that sprint, he dismantled the entire process. He said, "This is not working. I don't think we should be continuing doing this." And we were all shocked because it was the first sprint and it wasn't personal. It was about the process, but he took it personal. So his ego was attacked and he didn't like it at all.
Mm.
If anybody has thoughts on those two examples, even though those were two examples like Steve's and Mario, two different situations, I thought there were some common themes there and trend. So anybody would
I
like,
just
yeah.
every day we work with people who are real human beings and they have egos and they have other things going on in their lives that we don't even know about. And sometimes people react in such surprising ways, and you're scratching your head saying, why would you have that reaction? And I think that's the part about, leadership and authenticity. And, do you bring your authentic self to work every day and let people know what's actually going on? Like if he felt so offended that he had to totally walk away from the process, what was that about? Had he had failures previously in his career? And then he felt attacked. And so I think that's the fine balance you always have to walk, it feels like.
You know, so in one of the classes that I teach at the UM is a leadership class, right? And one of the things in the class is called the failure resume, which is the premise here is that for you to be a great leader, you have to kind of make peace with your past, with your, with you, with who you are, with your strengths, with your weaknesses, and kind of accept yourself as you are, with the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it helps you to so you have to think about times in the past when you have failed, right? And then you have to talk about it confidently and say, whatever, I was fired from my job, and just kind of be responsible and say, this is something that happened in my life. I'm not a bad person. Right, and stuff like that. And one of the things that I really liked about it is that because you have to practice and you have to do it with a peer, you have to do it, in front of a class, you have to write an essay about it. So after you're doing all of these practices, you come to this realization that, hey, even if I'm a good person and I'm doing my best, and some things will go bad, and there are going to be times where I'm not going to be effective and something is not going to go my way. But that doesn't make me a bad person or anything like that. And I don't need to, like, either it doesn't have to be a secret. I don't have to hide it. I don't need to live the rest of my life feeling ashamed, embarrassed. I just need to First is I need to accept it as part of who I am. It's part of a complex individual that I am. Second is reflect about it, right? What happened? Can I do, is there something that I can do about it? How can I do it differently and all that? But what I find, the reason why I'm bringing up this example is because what ends up happening, because they have to, as part of the process, you have to give feedback. So when you say your situation, somebody's going to give feedback to you and stuff. It's kind of interesting. But anyway, what ends up happening is that what you learn with it is that when somebody gives you critical feedback or negative feedback and you feel bad about it, you feeling bad about it doesn't make you a bad person. You're feeling bad about it because you have good intention, because you came to this world to do good things. You are operating from a good intention, and you want to be a good person. So when somebody comes in and says, hey, I didn't like this, or that was bad work and stuff like that, you are feeling bad because the objective that you had to do something that had a positive outcome didn't work. So you are kind of feeling bad about it. But then this exercise in the failure resume and all that makes you change your mind about that and say, it's okay. I tried to do something good. It didn't work. Let me, open up to how can I do it the next time and all that. And so at the end of the semester, when the students give feedback, that's one of the areas of the entire semester that people have like their favorite part is learning to make peace with the complexity of who you are, with the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, giving
Really
yourself
good.
grace is an important piece in this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, we've run over. Just in closing, let me say that trust is built when communication is predictable and inclusive and respectful, whether we're recognizing power dynamics sometimes, but doing it without politics being involved. we just skimmed the surface. There are a lot of other things Luis and I could have talked about and gone for another hour for sure. I'm grateful for Luis and for the participation of everybody here. Thanks so much for your energy and your insights. We'll send out each of you a copy of this recording and a summary and a transcript and the recording. If you'd like if any of you would like to reach out to Luis or me, my email is S as in Steve Moss at execspringboard.com, EXEC springboard.com. And
Yeah, and if
Luis,
you guys go to a LinkedIn event, some of you connected here through a LinkedIn event. If you go to the LinkedIn event, multiple of you are there. If you did a reaction or go ahead and put a comment so that amongst yourself, if you're not connected on LinkedIn yet, that you can connect. And then I want to take an opportunity to thank you, Steve, publicly here with the team for your great support for so many, for so long. And I'd like to say, in the context of today's conversation, one of the things that I like about Steve is that Steve is very straightforward. He's a very straightforward guy that is very transparent. And one of the things that I've appreciated is over the many years that I've known Steve, he's given me feedback, and he's always giving me feedback that is presented always respectfully, with kindness, with the best intentions. And I always receive it well, always welcome it, because I know, it almost like Steve illustrate what we were talking about, is that the actions that Steve have had with me over the years have demonstrated to me and has earned my trust, because I know he means well and wants the best for me, so that every time that gives me feedback is always well received and appreciated. So thank you very much to all of you for making the time to join us. Looking forward to doing more together. So, give us feedback on how these went and what more we can do to
we
continue to
would
support
appreciate
and
that.
grow it. Yes.
Have a
Thanks,
great
Thank you
everybody.
weekend,
so
everybody.
much.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye now.
Bye.